A new trainer class introduced on this route are the Gamblers, and I think we all know by now that the concept of gambling has been subject to a lot of censorship in the Pokemon games, and these are no exception. Well, in the original localization for Red, Blue, and Yellow, they were accurately called Gamblers, but in Fire Red and Leaf Green, they changed it to Gamers. Alright, what do these gamers play all day? Voltorb Flip? And it's even stupider because they didn't even start censoring the actual game corners until the next generation after that. So it's like, okay, you can have actual gambling, like, in the game that you can do, but referencing it as a trainer class, no, that's too much. And it's the most transparent, obvious censorship too, because all their NPC dialogue is still about gambling and luck and all that kind of stuff. Oh, and they look like this. This is what Nintendo of America thinks you look like. Yeah, forget about the stereotype of gamers being fat, sweaty nerds. No, clearly, gamers are old-ass hobos with an obsession for talking about luck for some reason. According to the American branch of one of the world's biggest gaming companies. But then the Gambler Trainer class appeared again in Generation 4. And this time they don't look like hobos. So they didn't call them gamers in the localization. I can't make this shit up. Instead, they called them PIs. Because their outfit looked kind of like a private investigator. Just like this looks like a gamer, apparently. We truly are the most oppressed minority. Anyway, so now that I'm at the store, this is as good a time as any to finally talk about something that I really should have mentioned a long time ago, and it's the currency used in this game. It's yen. It's literally just yen. It's the real-life Japanese currency. There's no fictional bullshit going on here. They literally just use the word yen. But of course, we can never have anything Japanese in an English localization of one of these games, so they changed it to Poké Dollars. And this is another one of these things that people make all these jokes about without knowing that it's just a localization problem. Because people are always like, one bottle of water is $100. No, it's not. It's 100 yen. That's like $1. And there's actually an edit like this in the anime where they're at a restaurant and they get their bill, and it's like 1,000 and something yen. And 4Kids changed the yen symbol to a $sign, but didn't change the number at all. It's like, you're already editing this frame. You changed the yen symbol to a $sign. You edited a bunch of other shit on the same frame too. They removed a bunch of text and shit. If you're already editing it, at least have it make sense and change the number accordingly so that they're not paying 1,000 fucking bucks for a meal. Or, you know, don't Americanize shit in the first place. Also, in that one shot in the dub, they use like an actual real-life $sign, while in the English versions of the games, they use a fictional Poké Dollars currency. And that's another thing the English version likes to do. They just slap Poke in front of everything. Like, Pokeballs are actually Monster Balls in Japanese, and, you know, shit like that. But at least it's not as bad as the Digimon dub, where they just have everything start with Digi. Digimon, Digi-Egg, Digi-World, Digivice, Digidestin. Did you really think this was a fucking good idea? We are this close to fucking Smurf language. Anyway, another topic that I've briefly mentioned before, but I want to elaborate on a bit, is the sprites in this generation. The sprites you see in this version, Japanese Red and Green, are the original batch of sprites. Then they made another completely different set of sprites for Japanese Blue, which is the one that was also used for the international Red and Blue version. I'm talking only about Pokemon front sprites, not back sprites or anything else. And then they made yet another different set for Yellow. So the Red and Green ones, we never actually got to see them officially in any game released outside of Japan, which is kind of a shame, even though a lot of them are absolutely hideous. These are the original depictions of the Generation 1 Pokemon. They didn't make the artworks first and then base the sprites on them later. No, the sprites were the first depictions that they made for Pokemon, and then the artworks were based on them. And even though the blue sprites were, for the most part, an improvement, there are some that definitely look worse in blue than they did in red and green. And also, some of the Pokemon sprites in the blue version aren't accurate to their official designs. Like, for example, Dogas has its skull and crossbones above its face in its blue sprite, wherein every other official depiction it's below its face. Kingler's claws are both the same size in the blue sprite, even though they're supposed to... one of them is supposed to be bigger than the other. Tamatama has a giant egg in the middle, and Parshin's shell is horizontal instead of vertical. And then, of course, there are some sprites in both versions that are just plain ugly, like a Down syndrome Pukurin, a Kamonegi that's been stepped on, a bootleg Furby, My Little Hellspawn, and holy shit, I'll see that in my nightmares! Oh, and who could forget the infamous Togekiss spying on a Dodo? That one's a classic. Thankfully, the yellow sprites generally look a lot better, with a few exceptions, but that was also by the time when the anime had come out, so they had come up with finalized designs for all the Pokemon, and there's no longer these little inconsistencies. Nidorina no longer has a pig nose, which it did in both the red and green and blue sprites. So that only leaves the back sprites looking like shit, which were never updated throughout the entirety of Generation 1. And the thing about them is they were clearly drawn at a lower resolution and then upscaled. I think those were actually some of the first assets drawn for the game, and that might explain why they look that way, because they hadn't decided for the final design of the battle screen and they wanted the sprites to look smaller, so they drew them for like a beta version of the battle screen, and then when they made the final version of the battle screen, they never redrew the sprites and they just took their existing ones and made them bigger. I don't know, it's just speculation, but why the hell did they never update those? They changed all the front sprites twice throughout the first generation, but they never thought, maybe we should prioritize fixing those pixelated back sprites first? My favorite one is Powwow. It just looks like it has a mustache, like bonjour. By the way, that's gotta be one of the worst English names in the history of Pokemon. It's just, oh, it's a seal Pokemon. What should we call it? Seal? But I think it's only fair that after all this shitting on Generation 1 sprites, I should point out some of the good ones as well, because they're not all bad. Like, Blue Dokukurage doesn't give a fuck what you think. It's like, motherfucker, what did you just say about Generation 1 sprites? And it just shows that they clearly had some good pixel artists working for them, while others were just like, hey, I'm a drawer. Am I the only one who thinks Tosakinto's horn looks more like a party hat in a lot of these early sprites? Oh, and also we should totally make Red and Green Arbo the new surprised Pikachu meme, because that shit's fucking hilarious. And for some reason, I always thought Blue Pidgeot looked like a wind-up toy, but without the actual wind-up thing. I don't know why, it just looks so mechanical. Thankfully, from Generation 2 onwards, the sprites got a lot better. In fact, there are barely ever any sprites that don't look right in the later generations. Although Generation 5 kind of brought back the pixelated back sprites because of how the camera moves and zooms in. I remember when the first pre-release screenshots for Generation 5 came out, people were assuming those were like placeholder sprites and that they would be replaced with better resolution ones when the final game came out. Of course, that was before we knew why they looked that way in those screenshots, because we hadn't seen the gameplay in motion yet, so we didn't know the camera actually moved around. And then, of course, Generation 6 gave us 3D models, and yeah, nobody really likes those. Notice how I didn't even have time to take a step before that guy challenged me? That's a glitch in Generation 1 where sometimes it can happen that a random encounter can be triggered on the same tile as a trainer battle. In that case, the random encounter will be triggered first, and then immediately after that, the trainer challenges you. So I want to go back to something I said a few episodes ago. You know how I was talking about that trade where the person wants Nidoran for another Nidoran of the other gender, and in the original Generation 1 version, the trade is the same between both versions, and in one version he gives you the common Nidoran for the one that's rare in that version, and in the other version it's the same trade, but the other one is rare in that version, and in Fire Red and Leaf Green they changed it to be different between both versions, but he always gives you the common one, and I said that's stupid. Well, forget everything I said, because it turns out I am an idiot box, and I completely forgot that there is another trade in that building over there that is the exact inverse of that trade, basically. Except it's with the evolved forms, Nidorino, and Nidorina. So, it's not this guy, it's that guy over there. In this version, he wants a Nidorina for a Nidorino. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, he will always give you the gender that's the more rare one in whichever version you're playing. So yeah, forget what I said about that last trade being stupid. This one makes up for it, and that's like the whole point, that there's an inverse version of that trade, and I was a complete idiot for saying that in the first place. If I had 30 Pokemon registered as caught, which I don't, this guy would give me the Dowsing Machine, or as it was called in the localization back then, the Item Finder. They probably changed that because the item names in the English version back then didn't have enough letters to fit the words Dowsing Machine in there. But then in Heart Gold Soul Server in Generation 5, they did it anyway and called it the Dowsing Machine. And then by Generation 6, the character limit was no longer a problem, and they just translated it accurately as Dowsing Machine. So for once, the localizers actually went back to an item that already had an existing English name and changed it to be a more accurate translation. Why don't they do this more often? So there was a hidden item in that bush over there. There was also one in that other bush on the other side of the house. I have no doubt they put them there so that you could immediately test out the Dowsing Machine right after you got it. Of course, I don't need it because I know they were there by heart, because I played this game a million times, because I have no fucking life. So I'm about to head over to the Saint Anne, or SS Anne as it's called in the English version, because Saint is too religious or some shit. Although, once again, just like with the Pokemon fan club, 4Kids didn't get the memo and still called it Saint Anne in the English dub of the anime. So the one time 4Kids doesn't censor something, it comes at the expense of being inconsistent with existing English names. Can't have it all. So when I get to the Saint Anne, whose name, by the way, is a reference to a game called Pulseman that Game Freak made for the Super Famicom. There's actually quite a few references to that game in the Pokemon series. I'm sure everyone wants me to talk about the truck. Now, I think everyone knows by now that all the rumors about finding Mew under there are complete bullshit. At least I hope everyone knows that. Please don't let me down, guys. But there's still a few things I want to talk about regarding that truck. But before that, let me just... After I talk to this guy, I'm gonna change the lead to Fushigi-So, not just because there are a lot of water types here, but also because I currently have 9 Pokemon registered as caught, and I need 10 to get the Flash HM. And Fushigi-So evolves into Fushigi-Bana at level 32, so I'm hoping for it to reach that point by the end of the Saint Anne, or at least by the end of the gym. So anyway, truck. The thing that makes the truck curious in the first place is the fact that it's in a location where you can't even see it under normal circumstances. It was to the right of that little area where I walked onto the boat, but there's a bit of water separating the path that you can actually walk on and the part where the truck is on. So you need surf in order to get to it, but by the time you get access to surf, the ship will have already set sail and there's no way to get back to it legitimately. The only way to actually go see the truck is by using one of several glitches to reboard the Saint Anne. The more famous method to do this is the one where you stand next to the sailor who's blocking your path and hold the D-pad in a certain way, then save the game, reset, and then you kind of clip through him. But here's the thing. When I was a kid, I remember being able to reboard the ship without doing that kind of stuff. I remember this vividly because a friend of mine told me a variation of the Mew myth and I tried it out. So how was I able to just go back there without doing the surfing through the sailor thing? Well, it turns out there's actually another way to reboard the Saint Anne. And it's actually more obvious than you think. You just make the ship not leave in the first place. So the cutscene when the ship leaves is triggered when you exit the ship after getting the the cut HM, right? So all you have to do is get the cut HM, then lose in a battle. You'll be teleported back to the last Pokemon Center you visited, and since you never actually left the ship through the exit, it doesn't trigger the cutscene, and the ship will still be there, and you can report it anytime. But what's interesting to me is the fact that the surfing through the sailor method is so much more well known than this much more obvious one. That led me to an interesting conclusion. This game is so fucking easy that it's more likely for people to find out about a glitch that involves save data manipulation in order to surf through NPCs than it is for people to lose a battle. And still, I was that one kid who had that happen to them by complete accident, so maybe I shouldn't be the one talking about how piss easy this game is. Okay, I'll shut up now. Actually, now that I think about it, there's a third way that you can get to the truck that's not really technically a glitch, and that they might have thought about the possibility that you could do this, and maybe that's the reason they put the truck there in the first place. So, once again, the whole reason why you go to the St. Anne in the first place is to get the cut HM, right? Well, but what if you already had a Pokemon that knows cut that you got from a trade beforehand? That would be the only kind of legitimate way you would be able to access that area. And the reason I just remembered that is because I was about to talk about the role the truck plays in the remakes, and in Fire Red and Leaf Green, they actually paid homage to all those rumors, and they hid something in there, namely a lava cookie. And that method of trading a Pokemon that knows cut beforehand, that method actually still works in the remakes. Or Fire Red and Leaf Green, I should say specifically, because Let's Go, they did something different. In that version, you actually can just simply surf to the truck because the sailor doesn't stop you anymore. You can just straight walk past him and walk all the way down to the pier, and the ship just won't be there, but you can still access that area. And in that version, the lava cookie from Fire Red and Leaf Green was replaced with a revive. So now that I'm done with this topic, I want to come back to something that I briefly mentioned earlier. This whole thing where the video games and anime have different names for certain things, like the Saint Anne being the SS Anne in the English games. That begs the question, how much intel did 4Kids actually receive from Nintendo of America? Because they obviously got some, because the English dub of the anime actually started airing before the games even came out in English, so if they just went in fully blind, then everything would have different names, all the characters and Pokemon and everything. But as much as I love to rag on 4Kids for messing up stuff like Saint Anne, there's actually one little detail that 4Kids got surprisingly right that even most Pokemon fans seem to kind of not really notice. And it's about the main character. So everyone always says like, oh, are Red and Ash the same person? And it's like, kind of, because in the games, when you get to select the names, the first option is Red, then the next option is Satoshi in the Japanese version, and Ash in the English version. So even in the games, Ash is the English equivalent to Satoshi. And the same thing applies to Green, aka Blue, and Shigeru, aka Gary. So I see a lot of people assume that the names Ash and Gary are just invented for the anime, but they are actually in the games. And that's what I find is surprising, is that even though even most fans don't really realize that these names exist in the games, 4Kids did pick up on this. Or more likely, it was Nintendo of America who told them, hey, these are their English names. And that later version checks out because Veronica Taylor said in an interview once that when she first auditioned for the role, Ash went by the name of Casey. So what probably happened was 4Kids was originally gonna call him Casey, then got a note from Nintendo of America saying, hey, here's the game, his English name is Ash. And then they used the name Casey later for a different character in the Generation 2 anime. Wonder if that's a coincidence. So right here is the... Oh no, my fucking bag is full. Next time.